Very good morning, friends. I hope you're all safe and healthy. Well, in this particular month, I have been talking about Indes 101, which is dealing with first time adoption of Indes. And the previous couple of videos, I elaborated on the concept that we are required to make what we call a third balance sheet. That is called an opening Indes balance sheet that is on the date of transition. Now, that particular balance sheet is prepared on the basis of a general principle, and that is we need to do a retrospective accounting. And we said that in terms of the retrospective accounting, we follow the concept of what you call R&D, that is recognition, remeasurements, reclassifications, and derecognition. But then we said that there are what we call E&E, that is exceptions and exemptions related to the opening Indes balance sheet. Now today, from this particular video, we start with some crucial points which relates to the E&E. Now just to remind you, in terms of E&E, we're talking in terms of the mandatory exceptions, that is dealing in Appendix B, which talks about that retrospective application is prohibited. And we're going to talk in terms of optional exemptions that's given in Appendix C as well as Appendix D, which is talking in terms of giving a choice to the company that you want to apply these exemptions or not. Now, in this particular video, we're going to talk in terms of the mandatory exceptions, and one of the most important mandatory exceptions is dealing with the concept of estimates. We know that when we make financial statements, there are various estimates which are made in terms of, like for example, when you make a provision for a liability in the books of accounts, the provisions even under previous GAAP was required under AS 29. Now, what I've done, I have converted this into a very interesting three-step model, and I call this as my own name, KB's three-step model, which is going to give you that if an entity has or has not made any estimates based on a previous GAAP, how are we going to deal with that particular situations in the opening Indes balance sheet? Let's find this out in detail in this video. उम्मीद करते हैं आपकी तैयारी जो बच्चे सीए फाइनल के लिए दिसंबर 21 में एग्जाम्स दे रहे हैं उनकी तैयारी अच्छी चल रही होगी। लेकिन अब इसका वक्त आ गया है कि आप अपनी तैयारी पर एक छोटा सा एक मॉक टेस्ट भी ले लें जो आपको सिमुलेट कर देगा वो कंडीशंस जो आप एग्जाम्स के लिए फेस करने वाले हैं। अनअकैडमी पर सीए फाइनल के लिए अलग अलग सब्जेक्ट्स के आपके टेस्ट आ रहे हैं, फुल लेंथ टेस्ट जो मॉक टेस्ट होंगे आपके, इन्हें आप लाइव और नॉन लाइव मोड दोनों के अंदर दे सकते हैं। और जैसे कि आप देख सकते हैं टाइमिंग्स आपके जो हैं वो 3 PM to 6 PM है यदि आप ये टेस्ट लाइव देते हैं, और अलग अलग सब्जेक्ट्स के अलग अलग डेट्स पर टेस्ट हैं। ऑडिट का 15th और 20th को, फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्टिंग का 17th को, लॉ का आपका 22 नवंबर को, SCMP 16th नवंबर को, और DT 15th एंड 20th नवंबर, और IDT का 17th नवंबर। तो अलग अलग डेट्स पर ये टेस्ट हैं। इसके लिए आप फ्रीली एनरोल कर सकते हैं। डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स के अंदर आपको इन टेस्ट के एनरोल करने के लिए एक लिंक मिलेगा, एंड आप लाइव या नॉन लाइव मोड दोनों के अंदर ये टेस्ट दे सकते हैं। जैसे ही आप ये टेस्ट दे देंगे तो आपको इनका सॉल्यूशंस भी आपको मिल जाएंगे, और उसके बेसिस पर आप इवैल्यूएशंस कर सकते हैं। यू कैन यूज इट फॉर फ्यूचर रेफरेंस एज वेल। तो कुछ नहीं करना, आपने बस अपनी तैयारी को टेस्ट कीजिए, मॉक टेस्ट दीजिए, एंड विश यू ऑल द बेस्ट फॉर द डिसम्बर एग्जाम्स, एंड लेट्स क्रैक इट। वेल, एज आई जस्ट सेड that I've tried to create a three-step model based on the concept of estimates. Now, when you pick up the opening balance sheet, that is the balance sheet on the date of transition, which is made as per the previous GAAP, which in our cases is going to be based on accounting standards, that is IGAP, we need to first of all ask ourselves a question: were estimates made under IGAP? That means, did you make any estimates based in that balance sheet which is based on the IGAP? The answer would be a yes or a no. Now, if you say yes, we made the estimates, it's not the end of the story. We need to do some further analysis as well. So even if the answer is a yes, we'll go to step number 2. But if the answer is a no, now that means if the estimates were not made, then it's time that we make estimates. But what is important in this particular case is when you're making these estimates have to be done on the date of transition. That means, let's say my date of transition is 1st April 18. So 1819 is the comparatives and 1920 is the year in which the first time adoption has taken place. Now I am sitting at the end of March 20. And I am sitting on the end of March 20 and I'm looking at 1st April 18 as the date of transition. So what I need to do, I need to make the estimates assuming that I am sitting on the date of transition. We need to consider only the conditions which are present on that date, which means if there are any events which have occurred from 1st April 18 till March 20, that is going to be considered completely as a non-adjusting events. Though we might be aware sitting on March 20 that certain events have taken place over a period of 2 years, but they're not considered as a part of making the estimate. So we'll consider, okay, if I was sitting on 1st April 18, what would have been, the conditions which were present on that particular date. So look at those conditions. Don't apply what we technically call a hindsight. So we're not going to consider that, yes, we are aware of the happenings over the period of 2 years. That is simply ignored. So they are considered as good as a non-adjusting event. So that is if no estimates were made. Second step is that if you said, yes, we made estimates under the previous gap, now it's time to interrogate and find out whether there were any errors in the estimates or not. Well, if you say that, there were no errors in the estimate, we'll do something further. Because we also need to probe into that there is a consistency in terms of India. So even if you say no, there were no errors in the previous gap, it doesn't mean that I'll accept them as it is. So we're going to go to the step number 3 in that case. But if you say yes, these errors, when the errors were there in the estimations, then it is again necessary to make the estimates exactly the way you did in step number 1. That means we can say that if the estimates were not made, you're required to make the estimates. And if the estimates were made, but there were errors in those estimates, you again need to make the estimates, put it simply. Now comes the third step, and that is when you said that, we made estimates and we said, no, we did not make any errors in those estimates, then it's time to see that are those estimates made in the IGAP consistent with Ind AS or not. Now here again, there would be 2 situations, either a yes or no. So if you say that is absolutely consistent with the Ind AS, then you can directly accept the previous estimate. There is no need of making any kind of changes to the estimates made in the previous gap. But in a situation we say that, it is not consistent with the Ind AS, then it's time not to make estimates, but you can notice the word I said, adjust the estimates. So, you can see that in step number 1 and 2, I said we'll make an estimate. But in step number 3, I'm saying I'm going to make the adjustments to these estimates because there were no errors, but there was a little inconsistency in terms of the IGAP and the Ind AS. So there is a need to make adjustments, and those adjustments would also be made considering that we are sitting on the date of transition and we're going to consider all the events over the next 2 years as non-adjusting events. So I think to put it in a nutshell, when you're considering your opening Ind AS balance sheet, you need to see as far as estimates is concerned, did you make estimates in the previous gap? No, please make them. You said, yes, I made estimates. I said, okay, let's go to the step number 2. And that is any errors in those estimates? Yes, please make the estimates again. If you said, no, there are no errors, you go to the step number 3 and find out, is there a consistency in the IGAP and the Ind AS? You said, yes, there is a consistency. Please accept the estimates as it is. Otherwise, make adjustments to the previous estimates made as per IGAP. That is as simple and straight. So this is on one of the, you can say, mandatory exceptions given in the Appendix B at the time of making the opening Ind AS balance sheet. More to come in the next videos. Thank you for watching. Take care and bye-bye.